It's 1975 and Britain's roads are dominated by trucks built in places like Sandbach, Middlewich and Leyland. Names like ERF, Foden and Bedford ruled the highways. Fast forward 30 years and almost all of them are gone. What happened? A Swedish company called Volvo showed up with a truck so good it didn't just compete with British brands, it buried them. This is the story of how one revolutionary vehicle changed trucking forever and left Britain's once mighty truck industry in ruins. Before we talk about the fall, let's understand just how powerful Britain's truck industry actually was. In the 1960s and early 1970s, British truck manufacturers were everywhere. Companies like ERF, Foden, Leyland, Bedford and Seddon Atkinson weren't just local players, they were exporting trucks around the world. Take ERF for example. Founded in 1933 by Edwin Richard Foden after he left the family business over a disagreement about diesel engines, the first ERF diesel lorry rolled out that same year, with chassis number 63, Edwin's age at the time. ERF trucks became known for their lightweight cabs and customization options, perfect for tanker operators and bulk haulers. Then there was Foden trucks, which traced its roots all the way back to 1856. They started with steam wagons before switching to diesel. By the 1970s, Foden was building highly customizable trucks that could be painted any colour, fitted with any available drivetrain, and tailored exactly to customer specifications. Bedford, owned by General Motors, dominated the lighter end of the market. Their Mk4 tonner became the typical army truck you'd see rumbling through British streets. These weren't small operations. At its peak, British Leyland alone employed 150,000 people in the UK, with another 150,000 jobs in component industries. The British truck industry was a massive employer and a source of national pride. But here's the thing about pride. It can make you blind to problems brewing right in front of you. In 1965, a Swedish company most British truck drivers had barely heard of introduced something called the Volvo F88. This wasn't just another truck. This was the beginning of a revolution. According to classic and vintage commercials, the F88 was the start, the thin end of the wedge, the beginning of the end for Britain's truck dominance. Between 1965 and 1977, Volvo produced a staggering 40,000 F88 trucks. What made this Swedish truck so special? Everything. First, the cab. While British trucks still had drivers exposed to noise, vibration and discomfort, the F88 came with a proper sleeper cab designed for long-distance hauling. Independent tests in the early 1970s found the F88's in-cab noise was more akin to a saloon car than a lorry, measuring just 74 decibels at 2,400 RPM. Compare that to contemporary UK limits of 92 decibels for new vehicles at the F88's power level. Drivers could actually have a conversation without shouting. Second, the engineering. Volvo did something radical for the time. They brought engines, gearboxes, frames, brakes, drives and shafts all under their own control. This gave them quality control that British manufacturers, who often assembled trucks from various suppliers, simply couldn't match. The F88's engine was a masterpiece of compact power. While British manufacturers thought you needed an 11-litre naturally aspirated diesel to reliably produce 200 horsepower, Volvo's turbocharged TD 106 cylinder displaced less than 10 litres, yet produced 260 horsepower. By the mid-1970s, they'd pushed this to 290 horsepower and over 750 pounds-feet of torque. Third, reliability. Before Volvo's arrival, trucks were often noisy, uncomfortable and liable to break down. Volvo changed that equation completely. So why didn't British manufacturers just copy what Volvo was doing? Because they were stuck in a mess of their own making. Let's start with underinvestment. Bedford, despite winning military contracts with its Mk4 tonner, was starved of investment by its parent company, General Motors. Money that should have gone into developing competitive long-haul trucks was pumped into Vauxhall cars instead. Bedford trucks were seen as cheap and basic, with very little driver appeal. They simply couldn't offer the sleeper cabs and high-roof options that long-distance operators demanded. ERF and Foden had different problems. ERF was never a major manufacturer. Their domestic sales in 1981 totaled just 1,083 trucks. They were a small player trying to compete in an increasingly global market. Foden made a catastrophic mistake in the early 1970s. They built a massive new production facility designed for 6,000 trucks annually, expecting the boom in truck sales to continue forever. Instead, the market collapsed. The economic downturn combined with this huge expenditure pushed Foden into financial difficulty by December 1974. The British government had to bail them out. By 1986, Foden employed just 450 workers, down from around 3,000 at their peak. British Leyland was perhaps the biggest disaster of all. The company was formed in 1968 through government-promoted mergers, bringing together multiple truck and car manufacturers. At one point, BLMC held 40% of the British car market and owned prestigious brands like Jaguar, Rover and Land Rover. But the conglomerate had an incoherent product range, was slow to develop new models, and was plagued by industrial disputes. When Margaret Thatcher came to power in 1979, she acknowledged that, on any rational commercial judgment, there were no good reasons for continuing to fund British Leyland. Yet political reality forced her hand. The unemployment consequences were too severe to ignore. She ended up providing £900 million in taxpayer support. While British manufacturers struggled, Volvo kept innovating. In 1970, they introduced the F89 with a powerful 12-litre turbocharged engine producing 330 horsepower. The engine was so tall it had to be mounted at an angle to fit under the cab, which meant it couldn't be converted to right-hand drive for the UK market. But that didn't matter. Volvo simply uprated the F88's engine to 290 horsepower for British customers in 1972. The F88 became the iconic truck for Middle East pioneers, the drivers who made the legendary runs to Saudi Arabia and back. It looked like a proper long-distance truck because it was one. In 1977, Volvo launched the F10 and F12 series at the Frankfurt Commercial Vehicle Show. Over the next 16 years, they would sell approximately 200,000 units of these models. The F12 came with a 12-litre engine producing up to 400 horsepower in higher output versions. In 1979, Volvo shocked the industry again by introducing the Globetrotter, a raised-roof sleeper that redefined driver comfort. Along with Scania, Volvo came to dominate the European truck market. They weren't just winning on performance, they were winning on every metric that mattered to operators and drivers. One by one, the British manufacturers fell. Bedford closed its Dunstable factory in the late 1980s. A lifeline came when the site was sold to AWD Limited in 1987. But due to cheaper competition and virtual collapse of the UK market, AWD went into receivership in 1992. ERF was bought by Canadian truck maker Western Star in 1996. But as competitive pressure increased, especially after PACCAR purchased Foden, DAF trucks and Leyland trucks, Western Star decided to sell. German manufacturer MAN bought ERF in 2000, only to discover massive irregularities in the accounts. MAN sued Western Star's successor for around £300 million, eventually settling for £250 million in 2007. MAN closed ERF's factory in Middlewich in March 2002, throwing 650 staff onto the streets of Cheshire. The ERF badge disappeared completely in July 2007. Foden was acquired by American firm PACCAR in 1980 after a period in receivership. Production was moved from Sandbach to the Leyland assembly plant to reduce costs. In 2005, Packer announced that Foden production would cease in 2006. The reason? They needed manufacturing capacity for increased volumes of DAF brand trucks. The last Foden rolled off the production line in July 2006, ending 150 years of Foden truck manufacturing. Here's the ultimate irony. The only major truck factory still operating in the UK today is the Leyland facility. But it's owned by Packer and builds DAF trucks, not British ones. In 1998, Packer acquired Leyland Trucks, which had emerged from DAF NV's administration in 1993. By 2008, Leyland Trucks built a record 24,700 trucks at the assembly facility, but they were all DAFs, supporting DAF's leading UK market share. The British truck industry survived, but only as an assembly plant for foreign designs. The engineering brilliance, the innovation, the brands, all gone. So what destroyed Britain's truck industry? Was it really just Volvo's F88? Not exactly. Volvo was the catalyst, but the real killers were closer to home. Chronic underinvestment, management that prioritised short-term profits over long-term competitiveness, government policies that created unwieldy conglomerates, industrial relations that disrupted production, a failure to understand what customers actually wanted: comfort, reliability and performance. Volvo succeeded because they focused obsessively on building better trucks. They controlled their supply chain. They listened to drivers. They invested in research and development. By 2023, Volvo Group was spending over 26 billion Swedish krona, around $2 billion annually on R&D. British manufacturers, meanwhile, were fighting political battles, dealing with strikes and begging governments for bailouts. Today, Volvo Group is the second largest truck manufacturer in the world, with revenue reaching 553 billion Swedish krona, $52 billion in 2023. They employ over 100,000 people worldwide and produce trucks in Sweden, Belgium, the USA, Brazil, South Africa, Australia, China and India. Of the great British truck makers, only Leyland survives in name, as a factory building someone else's designs. The F88 didn't destroy Britain's truck industry through unfair competition or dumping. It destroyed it by being better, by showing what trucks could be when engineering excellence, driver comfort and reliability came first. The British manufacturers had every opportunity to respond, to innovate, to compete. They just couldn't or wouldn't do it. That's the real lesson here. Industries don't die because competitors are ruthless. They die because they stop being competitive. The Volvo F88 was just the wake-up call Britain's truck industry never answered.